All right, we're back.
Welcome. Welcome back, all of us.
We're on number 32 today.
We are. We are.
Let's rock and roll.
All right. Short recap of last week's session. We had a very short note, 8 words. It was actually 7 words. And what KH said was impossible, no power, will right through Bombay. So that's actually 7 words. When he talks about it again, he adds another word to it. But the problem was that they had used up the energy that was there when Olcott and Mahatma Rao were visiting, and they were still there at the time that note was sent, but they didn't have enough power with them to make it possible for KH to communicate. So that experiment was only minimally successful. Then Sinnett wrote a letter to HPB inviting her to come and stay with them. And she saw through the whole ruse. She knew immediately that it was only because he wanted communication through her. And so she said, I would rather give you a momentary discomfort of a refusal than the long-term discomfort of having me stay with you for a while. So she also said that the Mahatmas had an experiment cooked up. They were going to do something that, if it worked, was going to not only vindicate her, because everyone at the time, spiritualists especially, were saying that these Mahatmas were invented by her. If they existed at all, they were nothing but spirit guides, just like they were using spirit guides.
We left them hanging last time, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
We didn't reveal the experiment.
No, so this is, today is the sweet, the unraveling of this whole exciting experiment. If it worked, it would not only vindicate her and prove the existence of the masters, but it would give them a replacement for her. And she, exhausted and worn out as she was hoping to release her physical body and disappear from the scene. She also said she had a new pupil she was working with, obviously one of the pupils of the Mahatmas. His name was Deb Shortridge, short Asian guy. He may have been Tibetan, we're not sure, but he didn't dress in Hindu fashion. And then in letter 54, KH told Sinnett that he was slowly learning real knowledge, what they called Gyu, D-G-Y-U, real knowledge. And that's the ancient wisdom knowledge of how nature works, how evolution works. They talked about a system of degrees that Sinnett was trying to come up with, where they would actually teach people these concepts and then have a graded system of elevating them as far as their knowledge of them. All right, now to get ready for our next letter, number 55, I'm going to have Paul read the very last paragraph of what we covered last time.
So this is the last paragraph of letter 54. And this is, of course, this is KH
This
writing.
is from KH to Sinnett.
And now to Morya. This is strictly between us, and you must not breathe a word of it, even to Mrs. Gordon. Eglinton was preparing to depart, leaving in poor Mrs. Gordon's mind the fear that she had been deceived, that there were no brothers, since Eglinton had denied their existence, and the fact that the spirits were silent as to that matter. So, last week, Morya stalked into the motley crowd, took the spooks by the skin of their throats, and the result was the unexpected admission of the brothers, their actual existence, and the honor claimed of a personal acquaintance with the illustrious. The lesson for you and others derived from the above may be useful in future events yet to develop. Yours faithfully, Kurumi.
So Eglinton went there with this specific purpose of determining for himself, and he was a trance medium, was very young. I think he was only about 23 at this time. And he was an up-and-coming medium, and after that he became quite famous in London, in the UK. And so the Mahatmas said that he was a very good individual, he was honest, and they were hoping that he was going to be the one that they could train. But they were very careful. He was there actually for quite a few weeks, and he stayed at first with a wealthy merchant in Kolkata, I guess it was. And then the merchant, had to leave on business, and so he then transferred over to the home of the Gordons, Colonel and Mrs. Gordon. And they were both spiritualists and theosophists, so they were hoping that maybe he would get some kind of confirmation while he was staying with them, but he didn't. Except in one instance, when he was in a trance, his spirit guides kept saying, "We know absolutely nothing about any Mahatmas. We've never seen any. We've never encountered any." And Morya apparently got fed up with them finally, and he appeared to the spirit guides, the spooks as he calls them, and figuratively grabbed them by the throat and said, "I am a Mahatma. You ought to see the results of what I can do." And whatever he did, it shocked these spirits. And after that, they said, "Okay, we believe in you. You do exist." And they even started referring to the illustrious, which was a term that Sinnett used for Morya. So when Eglinton woke up from his trance, he was told what transpired, but he was not too happy that he didn't have any personal experience with it. This belief in the masters had kind of been foisted on him.
So how much true belief now did the humans actually have? The humans, the actual spiritualist people.
Oh, the Gordons absolutely believed it.
Eglinton
reluctantly at this point. He's like, "Okay, the spirit guides are telling me, but I didn't have any personal experience with it." And the whole time he was in India, the Mahatmas very carefully kept Olcott and HPB away from him because they didn't want anyone to be able to say, "Well, HPB was there, so of course she's the one who invented these Mahatmas, and all of the phenomena occurs when she's around." So they've got something cooked up for after he leaves. All right, let's go ahead and start letter 55.
All right, letter 55. This is March 24th, 1882. And this, of course, is from KH.
This is, yes.
Addressed to Sinnett, I assume.
Yes. Now, this is make a note of the date, March 24th, 1882.
Private, period. Good friend, I will not, in sending forth the letter, reiterate again the many remarks that might be made respecting the various objections which we have the right to raise against spiritualist phenomena and its mediums. We have done our duty, and, because the voice of truth came through a channel which few liked, it was pronounced fake. See, they really can't win here. If people are determined to deny it, nothing will change their mind.
And that's what they found out throughout all these years of effort.
That applies today. Too.
Yes. People would rather go with their emotions than with reason.
They don't want to admit that they could have believed something that wasn't true.
That's sometimes the case. They don't want to admit that they had a wrong belief. And this is a huge problem. People latch on to their beliefs, and it becomes a part of their identity to the point that admitting that they were wrong is like distressful to them.
The time has passed to argue, and the hour is near when it will be proved to the world that occult science, instead of being superstition itself, will be found to be the explanation and the destroyer of all superstitions. For reasons that you will appreciate, though at first you will be inclined to consider them unjust, I am determined to do that, which hitherto I have never done, namely, to impersonate myself under another form and perhaps character. I wonder if that borders on non-truth, though, satya.
You can, when he's not planning to appear physically, I don't think, because Eglinton is medium. He can see on the astral plane.
Impersonate myself under
so
another form.
they can appear in whatever form they want.
That's true. Okay. Therefore, you need not begrudge Eglinton the pleasure of seeing me personally, because Sinnett still has not ever seen KH in the flesh. That's why he's saying that. Right?
That's right. And this is going to be a bit of a problem.
This is interesting.
And by the way, it's Eglinton, but every time I type it, it autocorrects it, and I don't always fix it. It's without a G. Eglinton.
Oh, I'm pronouncing it.
That's fine.
Eglinton. There's no Egling. It's not
It's
Egling.
wrong in the text.
Okay. Eglinton. We'll put a blurb. I'll start that sentence over. Therefore, you need not begrudge Eglinton the pleasure of seeing me personally, to talk with me, and be dumbfounded by me, by the results of my visit to him on board the Vega.
Now, the Vega is the ship he's leaving on, the SS Vega, which SS, for anyone who wants to know, was a designation of a steamship, because steam propulsion was fairly new in 1882 still.
And I think
the designated regular ships, RMS or MS.
Motor ship.
Motor ship.
Yeah.
And then the steamship was SS.
Yeah. This will be done between the 21st and the 22nd of this month, and when you read this letter, will be a vision of the past.
Aha. So he arranged it so he would receive this letter on the 24th of March, but he said the occurrence, the event, will take place sometime between the 21st and the 22nd, so 2 days prior.
If Olcott sends you the letter today, he did, and that's the way it worked. Next paragraph. We explain mysteries by mysteries, you may say.
That's apparently something that he had said.
Which means Sinnett's frustrated that they don't answer a question with straight, direct language. They answer it with another...
something that brings up more questions.
Exactly. Well, since you are forewarned, it will not be a mystery. Since I'm taking you into my confidence. I have to say that I can relate to Sinnett with that. Sometimes I just, give me the darn answer.
And we've said before, the Mahatmas, their plans can change on a dime. They can be headed in one direction, and something will happen that all of a sudden they have to switch. And so they don't reveal too much, partly because of that, because so many things can change in a short period of time.
And it takes them energy to explain things.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's also a test for the chela to see if they're willing to go with the flow.
Vairagya.
Yeah, exactly. Not be attached to it.
I'll read that last sentence again. Well, well, since you are forewarned, it will not be a mystery, since I am taking you into my confidence. One of them is to save you a feeling of involuntary envy when you hear of it. And since he will see somebody quite different from the real KH, though it will still be KH, you need not feel like one wronged by your trans-Himalayan friend. Another reason is to save the poor fellow from the suspicion of boasting.
Yeah, it's to protect him too.
The third and most important is that theosophy and its followers have to be vindicated at last. Eglinton is going home, and were he, upon his return, to know nothing of the brothers, there would be a sore day of trial for poor old HPB and HSO. That's Olcott. Henry Steele Olcott. Mr. Hume chided us for not appearing to Eglinton. He chuckled and challenged us to do it in front of Fern and others. For reasons which he may or may not be able to appreciate, but you will, we could not, or rather would not, do so, as long as Eglinton was in India. We had very good reasons to forbid HPB to either correspond with him or take too much notice of him in the Theosophist magazine or publication. But now that he is gone and will be hundreds of miles away at sea on the 22nd, so that no suspicion of fraud can be brought against either of them, the time for the experiment has come. He thinks of putting her to the test. He himself will be tested. This is cool. All right, so
Yeah.
they're explaining this plan. Okay.
Yeah, he's taking Sinnett into his confidence carefully.
Yeah. So KH is going to appear to, or it did, at this point he did, in a different form, probably in the physical world, obviously, but not looking like his actual body.
When KH wrote the letter, he hadn't done it yet.
Correct.
But he knew when it was going to happen.
Right. But we're reading this, Sinnett read it on the 24th
Right.
afterwards.
After the fact.
So he appeared, and now I can't wait to see what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Thus, my faithful friend and supporter, be prepared, since I will recommend discretion to Eglinton, and suggest that he recommend the same in turn to Mrs. Gordon, such that the good lady may feel inclined to carry it on too far. I give you beforehand a statement for her, calculated to unseal her lips.
All right, so he's saying that Mrs. Gordon is a person, being English, who will be very careful about revealing any information that pertains to someone else. And he's said that he was going to have Eglinton tell her that she needs to be somewhat careful, or KH is going to make sure that information gets to her. But he doesn't want her to be too careful, because otherwise it will kind of mess up the experiment.
Is she on the ship with
No.
with him?
He had been staying with them until the moment he left. He left from Kolkata on the ship. So he was with them right up to the very last.
And he's going back to England?
Yes. But
From
he's
India
planning to come back very soon after this, in April, in fact.
How does that work from South India to England? How are they?
Well, Kolkata is on the very east coast of India, and so they have to go around the tip of India in the Indian Ocean, past Saudi Arabia, and then through the Suez Canal,
through the
all
Mediterranean.
of the Mediterranean
Okay.
up to England. Yeah,
The Suez Canal existed back then.
What's what?
The Suez Canal existed back then.
Oh yes, it opened a few years before this.
Wow, that's fascinating. Wow. Now for Mr. Hume. He has worked for us and is certainly entitled to our consideration so far. I would willingly have written to him myself, except that the sight of my familiar writing might produce a reaction in his feelings for the worse before he even goes to the trouble of reading what I have to say, because he's already kind of annoyed by the
Yes, and
masters.
he said even if I send him a letter, he's going to look at it, he's going to be annoyed before he even opens it.
Right. Will you kindly undertake the delicate task of notifying him of what I now write to you? Tell him that there are persons, enemies, who are anxious to catch the old lady at cheating, to entrap her, and that, for that very reason, I am determined to settle the question once and for all. Say to him that, profiting by his advice, I, K.H., will appear to Eglinton, myself at sea, between the 21st and 22nd of this month, and that, if successful in bringing the rebel who denies the brothers to his senses, Mrs. Gordon and Colonel Gordon will be notified of the fact immediately. That's all. We have waited on purpose until his departure to conduct our experiment, and now we mean to act. Yours ever, K.H.
And then he thought of another thing, so he wrote a postscript.
This is like a PS then, okay. Till the 25th of March, Mr. Sinnett is expected to keep his lips closed, as they will be in death. Not a soul but Mrs. S., your good lady, that would be his wife, must know one word of this letter. This I expect of your friendship, and now I put it to the test. You may write to Mr. Hume just now, so that the letter might be received by him on the 24th in the afternoon. Your future depends on this, your silence.
Believe it or not, in those days, they had mail delivery twice a day.
Oh my gosh.
Once in the morning, once in the afternoon. I even remember when I lived in Europe, in France, years ago, there was delivery twice a day of mail. So here's the story. Mrs. Gordon received a letter from HPB on March 19th. Now, the ship had sailed a few days before, and this letter that she received said something was going to happen, but it didn't go into any details. So a letter from HPB just saying, be aware that something's going to happen. And then Mrs. Gordon received a telegram from HPB dated March 22nd, which was a Wednesday. And it was dated at 9:09 p.m. Bombay time. And it was sent as a telegram, but a delayed telegram. So it wasn't delivered until the following day because it had been sent so late at
And
night.
telegram goes over electrical means?
Yes, but still, to have someone go out at 11 o'clock at night to deliver a telegram would have cost extra. Mm-hmm. So instead, they just said, yeah, it's okay to deliver it tomorrow. And the telegram said simply, KH just gone to Vega. Not Vegas, Vega. So KH went to the ship. And then again, let's see, that one was received about the middle of the day on Thursday, this first telegram. But she received a second telegram from HPB later the same day, asking them to set a time when they could have a sitting, all be in the same room at the same time. Now, Olcott at this time had been on a tour of India, and he was staying with the Gordons. So we've got Olcott, Colonel Gordon, and Mrs. Gordon, and they said, okay, let's make it for tomorrow, Friday, the 24th, at 9 p.m. Now, keep in mind that setting a time in those days wasn't that easy because they didn't have time zones. Even though they had trains, they didn't yet have time zones. So 9 p.m. in Calcutta, which was clear on the East Coast, was not the same as 9 p.m. at Bombay. You had to specify the location specifically because every city, if you changed longitude, was going to be a different time. So here's what happened. On the 22nd of March, which was that Wednesday, so that's when HPB sent the first telegram, 9:09 Bombay time. Now, the ship was way out in the ocean, several hundred miles away. So we're referring to Bombay time. And she said, KH just went to the Vega. So what he did is he appeared to Eglinton on board the ship in his Mayavi Rupa, which is a temporary body. And as we pointed out, you can make it look just like the person that it represents, or you can make it look however you want. So apparently, and this may have been partly to save Sinnett's ego, he chose to appear somewhat different from his actual appearance. But he did appear to him and had a long communication with him, and we don't know all the details, but we'll find out a couple of things. And the result was that Eglinton was completely convinced that he was a Mahatma, that they did exist, and everything was apparently going to work out exactly as planned. So,
I wonder what the conversation was like. So, Eglinton's on a ship. He's standing around somewhere, sitting. Up walks some guy.
well, he
And
was
the-
probably in his stateroom, I'm assuming.
Okay, so he's in his room, and someone just
Well,
materializes.
but he's a medium, so that's not unusual.
And I wonder
but-
what KH said to make him.
He apparently it was enough to convince him this wasn't any spirit guide. This was someone much more special than just a spirit guide coming from the astral plane.
Isn't it interesting how so many movies and stories like depict scenes like this, where someone is hanging out somewhere, and then a spirit person, an enlightened person, or anyone appears and tries to convince them of something, and this is like something that's in
Sci-fi
science,
movie, yeah.
sci-fi, exactly, but they got it from somewhere. They got the ideas from
Exactly.
somewhere.
Well, if there are actual yogis who have powers, then it does happen. We don't have personal experience with it, but now Eglinton does have personal experience with it, not just as a spiritualist medium, but as someone who has experienced something that is far more powerful than what he was used to. So, a day or two later, I think it was 2 days later, he wrote a letter on board explaining everything that had happened and laying it out in detail. And that letter was transported phenomenally to HPB, and then she and the Mahatmas transported it phenomenally from Bombay to Kolkata to the Gordons. So those two last things took place
a day after the appearance.
almost instantaneously. But he had witnesses that signed his letter explaining that he was on board the ship. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a little bit of a twist here that kind of messed things up. There happened to be a theosophist on board, a Mr. O'Connor, who decided he wanted to get in on the act. He said, "Oh, let me write a letter to HPB, and that will make it even more interesting."
Well, how did he know anything was going on? Eglinton must have.
Eglinton told all of these people on board.
Okay.
So they were all excited. And this guy said, "Oh, I know HPB." He said, "Let me write a letter to her, and it can be transferred to her, and that will make it even more interesting." But it kind of messed things up, as we'll find out. Yeah. So here's what happened. On the 24th, which was when they decided to have their sitting in Kolkata, there was actually, let me have you read what Mrs. Gordon said about it.
Tell us again who the
better.
sitting was. With who was at the sitting? Tell us.
Olcott and Colonel and Mrs. Gordon. All right, so if you'll read from here, where it says start over to here, where it says end. This is Mrs. Gordon's account of that experience. And this is in the second edition of The Occult World.
At this hour, we three, Colonel Olcott, Colonel Gordon, and myself, sat in the room which had been occupied by Mr. Eglinton. We had a good light and sat with our chairs placed to form a triangle, of which the apex was to the north. In a few minutes, Colonel Olcott saw outside the open window the two brothers, whose names are best known to us, and told us so. He saw them pass to another window, the glass doors of which were closed.
Meaning the panes.
He saw one of them point his hand towards the air over my head, and I felt something at the same moment fall straight down from above onto my shoulder. I saw it fall at my feet in the direction towards the two gentlemen. I knew it would be the letter, but for the moment I was so anxious to see the brothers that I did not pick up what had fallen.
Of course, she's like, this is my chance to see them.
Colonel Gordon and Colonel Olcott both saw and heard the letter fall. Colonel Olcott had turned his head from the window for a moment to see what the brother was pointing at, and so noticed the letter falling from a point about 2 feet from the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine just...
Exactly. It just falls from the ceiling.
But there's nothing there. Then all of a
And they
sudden
probably
something's
had
there.
high ceilings, probably 9 to 12 feet tall.
Wow. When he looked again, the two brothers had vanished. So they're outside. What?
No, they were in the house.
But
Who's
they were-
outside? Oh, the brothers were outside.
or outside. Why?
And this is a high window.
I wonder
So
why they needed to be there for this to happen, because they never need to be at the
They
location
didn't.
where...
They didn't. But it gave the Gordons that much more confidence in the whole thing.
I wonder if they appeared in their actual bodies.
Who knows? They could appear however they want.
I know.
That would have been themselves. It wouldn't have been a Mayavi Rupa. It would have been
So they would have physically traveled...
not physically, but I mean their astral body could project there.
Okay.
And then take on however much
Physicality,
Exactly.
density. Yeah. It
to
could be
make
still...
it possible for them to perceive
Sure.
them.
It could be transparent like a ghost still,
Right.
somewhat. Yeah. There is no veranda outside, and the window is several feet from the ground.
So they were
Floating.
in the air. They weren't standing on the ground.
They were floating. They were just...
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And then one of them they don't know who's who. So it could have been KH or Morya.
They would have, because they had been described so many times, they would have known
She
immediately.
didn't say which one pointed, though. She said one of them
Oh,
pointed.
yeah, right.
It's like as if, like, look, what's going to happen? And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden...
Yeah, look, this is where it's going to happen.
And then it did.
And it
That
did.
is so wild.
So there was a package that fell, 3 items. So when this letter arrived phenomenally in Bombay to HPB, she
The
wrote...
one from Eglinton from the ship.
Right.
Okay.
She wrote on 3 of her visiting cards. Now, these are not like business cards. These are cards where you could write a long note on them, because when people went visiting, if someone wasn't home, they didn't just stick a card, they wrote a note.
Visiting cards.
So she wrote them on her note on 3 of these, sewed them together with a piece of blue silk thread, and then she transferred via the Mahatmas that plus her letter, plus a letter that KH wrote. He said while he was on board the ship, or at some point in the past, he had taken one of Eglinton's cards, his visiting card, and he wrote a note on it. So we've got 3 items that got delivered phenomenally. All right, I'm going to have you read the note that is from HPB written on 3 cards. So go ahead and read that first one.
Note on 3 visiting cards from Madame Blavatsky. Headquarters, March 24th. These cards and contents to certify to my doubters that the attached letter addressed to Mrs. Gordon by Mr. Eglinton was just brought to me from the Vega, with another letter from himself to me. K.H. tells me that he saw Mr. Eglinton and had a talk with him, long and convincing enough to make him a believer in the brothers as actual living beings for the rest of his natural life. Mr. Eglinton writes to me, the letter which I enclose is going to be taken to Mrs. Gordon through your influence. You will learn with satisfaction of my complete conversation to a belief in the brothers. Nice, he says it right there. Mm-hmm. And I have no doubt K.H. has already told you how he appeared to me 2 nights ago, etc., etc. K.H. commands me to write the note and send it off without delay so that it would reach you all at Howrah tonight, the 24th. I do so.
Howrah is the suburb of Kolkata where the Gordons live.
So how would Eglinton have sent it? So he writes it, but he doesn't have the power to transmit.
No. So he wrote the letter.
K.H. was still...
K.H. told him what he wanted him to do. He wrote the letter after consulting, and he had other people write on it that they...
As witnesses.
As witnesses. Even on the envelope, they put 3 crosses on the envelope. So when they received it, they were careful not to... disturb those 3 crosses that had been made on the envelope.
And then Cage probably took it back in his hands and made it disappear.
No, he because this was 2 days after he had visited, so he made it disappear from the Vega.
So after it was written, sealed, the X's were on there, somehow...
He transported it to Bombay.
Eglinton would have just set it down on a table and it would have just vanished or something like that.
Yeah. And then after HPB added her note to it, he brought it to them after adding his own note to it. KH did.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's when they appear outside of the window and point. Okay.
All right. So this is now the card that KH had taken from Eglinton's stack of visiting cards. And he wrote on it. So start there.
William Eglinton thought the manifestation could only be produced through HPB as a medium, and that the power would become exhausted at Bombay. We decided otherwise. But they do need HPB for most of these things.
Yes, but this required an enormous expenditure of energy. Normally this would not be allowed, but they got special permission, obviously.
He was anxious to test her. He often doubted. 2 nights ago, he had the required proof when Morya went to the spooks, right?
Right.
That's what, okay.
Well, no.
Oh,
He's because it was 2 nights before when KH appeared.
So
no,
KH,
Morya was several days before.
All right, KH is saying 2 nights ago Eglinton had the proof because that's when he was visiting him on the
KH appeared to him.
And will doubt no more. But he is a good young man, bright, honest, and true as gold when once convinced. KH. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the second item in the package that fell from the ceiling.
Right. And then Eglinton himself wrote a fairly long letter to Mrs. Gordon. And she didn't share all of it because some of it was personal because he had been their guest and it had to do with his visit there. But go ahead and read the essence of what he had to say there.
Okay. My dear Mrs. Gordon, at last your hour of triumph has come. After the many battles we have had at the breakfast table regarding KH's existence, and my stubborn skepticism as to the wonderful powers possessed by the brothers, I have been forced to a complete belief in their being living, distinct persons. I am not allowed to tell you all I know, but KH appeared to me in person 2 days ago, and what he told me dumbfounded me.
That's why he used the term dumbfounded.
Okay.
Okay, now it makes sense. All right, so there you have it.
Holy moly.
Yeah, quite involved manifestation and...
I hope our viewers feel I'm going to say fortunate to learn this because where is this information available? Yes, you can go and get the Mahatma Letters book, but I've had the book for 12 years and I never, I never knew this. And this is really cool as to the history of spirituality in the world.
Yeah.
This is very cool.
Yes, it is. And if you're unaware of all of the events in the background, because this all comes from several different books.
Right.
You would never be able to put it all together. I mean, students who are really serious about the Mahatma Letters are the ones who did all the work. I just look up their sources.
But even if you read the book thoroughly and did your best to comprehend it, you still wouldn't have all of the whole picture if you didn't do what Terry is doing here and taking from all these sources and connecting all the dots.
And that's because these were only the letters from the Mahatmas to Sinnett. That's it. And we don't have anything else to fill in all the gaps unless somebody makes that effort. Now that we have the background story of the incident on the SS Vega, we're going to go back to our regular programming, but this will come up again from time to time, and we'll get a little more information as we go along. All right, so we're now on letter number 56.
Well, I hope the results of the experiment are going to be explained. Is HPB vindicated, or is that coming?
At this point, it is. At this point, everything is on track.
Because only a few people on the ship know about this so far.
But it's going to take weeks and months
Right.
before we get the full picture.
Okay, letter 56, and this was received in Allahabad somewhere around March 26th to 28th. So this is right after the
Just a couple of days after Sinnett found out the rest of the story.
Okay. So Sinnett was asked to be quiet, to not tell anybody, and Sinnett probably doesn't know the details of everything yet, but he's going to learn. Okay.
But he's learning it now.
Okay. So this is from KH. The new guide has meanwhile a few words to say to you. The new guide.
Go ahead. That will become clear. I forgot who he's talking about there.
Okay. If you care anything about our future relations, then you better try to make your friend and colleague, Mr. Hume, give up his insane idea of going to Tibet.
Yeah.
Does he really think that unless we allow it, he or any army of Pellings will be enabled to hunt us out or bring back news that we are, after all, but a moonshine, as he calls it? Okay, so this is when Hume is trying to create an expedition to physically go to Tibet to find these guys.
Yeah, he's like, if you won't reveal yourselves, I'm going to come find you.
Wow. Madman is that man who imagines that even the British government is strong and rich enough and powerful enough to help him in carrying out his insane plan. Those whom we desire to know us will find us at the very frontier. Those who have set against themselves the Chauhans, as he has, would not find us were they to go to Lhasa with an army. His carrying out the plan will be the signal for an absolute separation between your world and ours. Hopefully just between him, though. Mm-hmm. His idea of applying to the government for permission to go to Tibet is ridiculous. He will encounter dangers at every step and will not even hear the remotest tidings about ourselves or our whereabouts. Last night, a letter was to be carried to him as well as to Mrs. Gordon. The Chauhan forbade it. You were warned, good friend. Act accordingly. Wow. So Hume is basically being cut off.
Last night, a letter was to be carried to him as well as to Mrs. Gordon. The Chauhan forbade it. So just in that specific incident.
Okay. And this is letter number 57. So this is now over a month later. No letters in April. This is now in May.
Right. So there's quite a gap here.
Yeah. My good friend, though Mr. Eglinton has promised to return by the end of June, he cannot do so after the danger that threatened him at Calcutta on the very day of his departure, unless he is thoroughly protected against any such disgraceful recurrence. If Mr. Hume is anxious to have him, let him. For want of something better, hire him as his private secretary for a year or so, now that Mr. Davison is far away.
Mr. Davison was Hume's secretary, but apparently had left to go do something else. And Eglinton was planning to come back to India, but remember, there had been an incident on the very day he left. Someone was riled up about some of the seances or spiritualist things that he had been doing, and threatened, apparently, to have him arrested. And so he got out just in time.
Wow.
And is a little bit reluctant to return. But KH is saying if he goes to work for Hume and he hires him, that's his protection, because Hume has a lot of influence in India.
If you or Mr. Hume are really anxious to see me, or rather my astral self, there's a chance for you. HPB is too old and not passive enough. Besides, she has done too many services to be forced into it. With Mr. Eglinton, if he is willing, the thing would become easy. Profit then by the chance offered. In another year, it'll be too late. So he's saying that he can use Eglinton's power, psychic powers.
Right. And he's very young. He would need training, as we'll find out, but he's honest. He's very receptive. He is convinced of the existence of the Mahatmas. So at this point, they're very hopeful that that's going to be the avenue for them to work in the future.
He might be able to replace HPB.
Right.
He's saying in 1 year it'll be too late. So he knows that, even if Eglinton is the next one, a year will be too late.
More than likely, the opportunity will have passed.
Right.
Everything has to be in a confluence of energy to make something happen. And the Mahatmas know that. They use astrology in a way that no astrologer does. And he's saying the energy patterns will not be conducive to that a year from now. All right, so now we have a letter that is from someone else. This is from Subba Row. And he has been asked to teach them some of the ancient wisdom doctrine.
We've talked about Subba Row, and didn't he have a falling out? Or
He did.
Has that happened yet, or is he back?
No, this is several years before that
Before the
happened.
falling out. Okay.
Yes, he was the chela that was adamant about not teaching these secret doctrines to Westerners. He was a Brahmin, and in their world, Brahmins are the only people. They reluctantly admit that some of the Tibetan Buddhists obviously have access to them, but they do not allow anyone else outside of their caste in India, and definitely not foreigners, to be taught these secret doctrines. So he's very reluctant about even being used for this.
All right, this is from Subba Row
To Sinnett.
to Sinnett. This is still in May 1882. To A.P. Sinnett, Esquire, editor of the Pioneer, etc., etc., etc. Dear Sir, I have been requested by Madame Blavatsky several times within the last 3 months to give you such practical instruction in our occult science as I may be permitted to give to one in your position, and I am now ordered by...
And he put a blank because he doesn't like to even write the name of any of the Mahatmas, but it was Morya that ordered him to.
And he's doing this reluctantly.
Yes.
Okay. ordered by Morya to help you to a certain extent in lifting up a portion of the first veil of mystery. Wow. So before we go on, this is really cool. This is quite a long way into the communication between Sinnett, Hume, and the Masters. How long? About a year? Have they been communicating? About a year?
It's more than a year and a half.
Okay, so a year and a half has gone by. Lots of things have happened, and now they're getting some more basic instruction on occult things, on how to lift up the first veil.
Right.
This is interesting.
So we've had only instructions so far on, and very basic, cosmology,
Right. Cosmogony.
and anthropology in very, very broad terms.
Not much practical. Some basic things about staying calm, not come into our world, meaning learn to raise your consciousness. Basic stuff on that, but nothing specific, right?
Right. They've given him in various ways some of the requirements for purification. Remember, through the other chela, the one
Right.
that failed, gave them
Right.
very good information about the purification that has
Yes.
to take place.
That's true. So those
So
requirements.
other than that, that's about all he's got at this point.
I just like that we're getting some more practical things so far
And that's
into
what
it.
we want to know.
Yeah, exactly. I need hardly tell you here that the Mahatmas can hardly be expected to undertake the work of personal instruction and supervision in the case of beginners like you, however sincere and earnest you may be in your belief in their existence and the reality of their science and in your endeavors to investigate the mysteries of that science. That was a long sentence.
Yeah, it was.
I tried to finish without taking a breath. This actually applies today, and we've said this to our listeners many times, that this holds true. The elevated beings known as Mahatmas can hardly be expected to undertake the work of personal instruction
Right.
and the supervision. They're not going to talk to you. They're not going to, or me, or you.
No. First of all, you have to go through all the purification that you're able to do on your own. And that can take a couple of lifetimes.
Lifetimes.
And once you have prepared yourself as a vehicle, then they can begin to work with you. But
Yes.
even then, it takes a long, long time. Do not ever think that you're going to get all of this in 6 or 8 weeks.
I do want to make it clear that some of us on Earth, maybe some of you that are watching, have been preparing for several lifetimes, and you are ready now. We haven't really said that, but you might be.
No, we have said that there are millions of people who have made some
Right.
degree of progress in past lifetimes and even in this lifetime. They're out there. It may be you, the one that's watching. So
Many of us wouldn't be this deep into it if it was our first time around doing it. Many of us wouldn't
Yes.
be this far along into it if this was our first lifetime doing it.
And both of us recognized immediately when we first saw theosophy in this lifetime.
Immediately, it was the path that we knew we were already on.
Right.
Immediately. When you know more about them and the peculiar life they lead, meaning the Mahatmas, the peculiar life, that's funny, I'm sure you will not be inclined to blame them for not giving you personally the instruction you are so anxious to receive from them. I beg to inform you that the help hereby promised will be given to you, provided you give your consent to the following conditions. Wow, he's pretty good. Number one.
He's very, he writes extremely well.
Yeah.
He obviously speaks excellent English, and he is very even better than Damodar in some ways, as far as making everything very concise.
I don't think Damodar was a Brahmin family from.
He was.
Okay.
He's the one who gave up caste.
Ah.
Subba Row did not. He did not give up his Brahmin
Okay. What?
entitlement.
DK gave up caste.
DK was Tibetan. He was disowned by his
Okay,
family, but he was
okay.
not in the Hindu.
We've shown a picture of Subba Row. There are photographs of him, and we've shown one. We can put a picture of Subba Row so you can see who we're talking about.
Yeah.
All right, here are the 4 conditions that Subba Row is requiring. Number 1, you must give me your word of honor that you will never reveal to anybody, whether they belong to the Theosophical Society or not, the secrets communicated to you, unless you previously obtain my permission to do so. Number 2, you must lead such a life as is quite consistent with the spirit of the rules already given you for your guidance. Number 3, you must reiterate your promise to promote, as far as it lies in your power, the objects of the Theosophical Association. Association? That's funny. Was it called that back then? The Theosophical?
Not really. It was the Theosophical Society, so I don't know why he said that.
And the objects are belief in brotherhood of all humanity.
Yes, that's number one above all.
And we agree to
study of ancient religions and philosophies. And only number 3 is development of cities, powers, the hidden powers latent in mankind.
Latent in everybody. Those are the 3. And the order of them is important.
Brotherhood, yes.
Yeah. Number 4, you must strictly act up to the directions that will be given to you with the instruction herein promised. Okay. I must also add here that anything like a wavering state of mind as to the reality of occult science and the efficacy of the prescribed process is likely to prevent the production of the desired result. So in other words, if you're not steadfast in your commitment and your belief, I don't like using the word belief, but it's a commitment, I guess. It's a steadfast will.
Yeah, it's certainty of the validity of what he's going to do.
In sending me a reply to this letter, I hope you will be good enough to let me know whether you are acquainted with the Sanskrit alphabet and whether you can pronounce Sanskrit words correctly and distinctly. This is probably mantra.
Yes.
He's talking about mantra.
Obviously, that's going to be one of the practices. And in order for it to be effective, he needs to know how to pronounce that correctly.
Wow. I beg to remain. Yours sincerely, T. Subba Row. I beg to remain. That's an interesting way to close.
Yeah. Very
well, I really hope we
flowery.
We can get some of these instructions.
Yes. Let's see what he comes up with. Okay. All right, we have another letter from Subba Row, but this one is to HPB. So in this letter, he's writing to HPB and referring to the fact that he's expected to teach Sinnett.
Now, this is June.
In this...
This is now June, so this is another month has gone by.
To this letter, KH affixed a couple of notes himself.
Okay.
It's phenomenally.
I assume you'll read those.
No, I can have you read them.
Okay.
They're in the ones that are in bold.
Okay, so it starts off with a bold note from KH. Extracts I got for your benefit, pitying your impatience, from Rishi M. See my note. And Rishi M is probably Morya.
Yes. So Morya's involved in this, and apparently HPB is impatient about it. And then his long note is at the end of the letter.
Okay.
But the rest of this letter, until we get to the note, is from Subba Row
to HPB. Okay, and this is June 1882. It would no doubt cause him, Sinnett, considerable inconvenience if he were obliged to change his mode of life completely. You will find from the letters that he is very anxious to know beforehand the nature of the siddhis, or wonder-working powers, that he is expected to obtain by the process or ritual I intend to prescribe for him. The power to which he will be introduced by the process in question will no doubt develop wonderful clairvoyant powers, both as regards sight and sound, in some of its higher correlations, and that the highest of its correlations is intended by our Rishi M. Morya to lead the candidate through the first 3 stages of initiation, if he is properly qualified for it. Wow.
So apparently, even as a married man, supposedly he could make considerable progress on the path.
Well, this is huge, though. This is like a huge milestone in the process here. So we're being told that they plan for Sinnett to become an initiate.
Right.
They would hope he does.
In the first stages of the initiation process, yeah. And obviously, they're hoping to train him to be so that they can communicate with him.
Yeah. Once HPB is
they're
done.
not training him so that he can project his consciousness somewhere else and all of that.
And go
sort of
demonstrate
thing.
his own powers and
Strictly communication
With
between
the masters.
Mahatma and the pupil.
But I am not prepared to assure Mr. Sinnett now that I will teach him any of its higher correlations. What I mean to teach him now is a necessary preliminary preparation for studying such correlations.
Now there's at least a page that is missing, and whether it got lost or whether perhaps one of the Mahatmas made it disappear, who knows. But there is a big part of the letter that's missing, so now we just have the end of it. And it starts in the middle of a sentence.
It says, my proposal into consideration. Next paragraph. As I have been wandering here and there since my arrival here, I have not been able to complete my second article with reference to Mr. Oxley's book. But I will try my best to finish it as soon as possible. For the present, I beg to remain your most obedient servant, T. Subba Row.
Now, we have the note that KH added to the letter, but I also need to point out that this and the note got separated because of the fact that they were written on different pages, and nobody connected the two until many, many years later. So letter 60 is actually the continuation of number 59.
But we haven't... Okay, letters 59 and 60 got separated in the original version. But this note, the first one is attached to letter 59 that we just read.
This was attached to 59.
Okay.
The second was on a separate page that got detached, separated somehow, and then someone realized it was actually part of 59.
So both of these are part of 59?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so this is another note that KH intercepted and wrote. It's KH, so KH is calling Sinnett my dear friend.
Right.
Okay. My dear friend, I strongly advise you not to undertake right now a task beyond your strength and means, for once pledged, were you to break your promise, it would cut you off from any further progress for years, if not forever.
Mm. So at some point, a chela on probation, if they've passed all of the tests, is invited to become an actual chela. But there's an oath that they have to take, and it is extremely serious, because if they break that vow, they can be cut off for many, many years and possibly even forever.
I said from the first to Rishi M. that his intention was kind, but his project wild. So really, it's Morya's idea for Subba Row to be teaching.
Yes, and it's kind of strange because normally he's the one who is very reluctant, but apparently he has changed his tune.
Wow.
And now he's quite excited about the possibility of Sinnett being trained so that they can work with him directly.
How can you, in your position, undertake any such labor? Occultism is not to be trifled with. It demands all or nothing.
Yes,
Wow.
It demands all or nothing. This is not like a weekend, thing to do for fun. It changes your entire life drastically.
There's so many people on Earth that go half.
Yeah, and you can't do that if you're going to go beyond a certain point.
Yeah.
At some point, remember, what does it say? The secret gateway that opens inward only and closes fast behind the neophyte forevermore. once you go through this, once you make that oath and say, I'm ready to move forward and cut off all my ties with the past, bam, that door closes. And then if you decide to go back, you're really messing up your progress.
I read your letter to Subba Row forwarded by him to Morya, and I see you do not understand the first principles of, and then this is broken up into the next letter, Chela training. Poor Subba Row is in a fix. That is why he does not answer you. On one hand, he has the indomitable HPB who plagues Morya's life to reward you, and Morya himself, who would gratify your aspirations if he could. On the other, he encounters the impassable Chinese wall of rules and law.
Meaning the wall of China, it's impassable.
Believe me, good friend, learn what you can under the circumstances, that is to say, the philosophy of the phenomena and our doctrines on cosmogony, inner man, etc. Subba Row will help you to learn this, though his terms, he being an initiated Brahmin and holding to the Brahmanical esoteric teaching, will be different from those of the Arhat Buddhist terminology. But essentially, both are the same, identical in fact.
So the esoteric Brahmanism, Hinduism, is exactly the same as Tibetan Buddhism. So it obviously doesn't include all of the superstitions that most Hindus adopt and love so much because it's drama, emotional drama.
Interesting.
And then in what goes in hand with all of this is Raja Yoga, which is the preparation, which is the meditation part of the practice. So you have to have all of those.
Yeah, very interesting. My heart melts when I read Mr. Hume's sincere, noble letter, especially what I can read between the lines. Yes, to one from his standpoint, our policy must seem selfish and cruel. I wish I were the master. In 5 or 6 years, I hope to become my own guide, and things will be different then. Let's wait. K.H.
So some interesting things here. My heart melts when I read Mr. Hume's sincere, noble letter, especially what I can read between the lines. And remember, he's pointed out so many times, despite his bluster and his gigantic ego, there's a very kind, compassionate person underneath. He goes on to describe a Tibetan tale that kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's about a genie or some kind of a mythical creature who is guarding a treasure, and this treasure chest is filled with all of the virtues. Unconditional love, charity, kindness. And while the person who has this chest is asleep, one by one, these virtues are disappearing. And he's going to wake up and find that they've all disappeared. But somehow he was trying to display that Hume has all of these inside of him, but he doesn't let them come out.
I wonder if he's talking about the same guide situation as we heard at the beginning of letter 56. The new guide has meanwhile a few words to say to you.
I think so.
It's probably the Chohan.
Oh, no, no, what he's referring to actually here is the fact that he is still a junior master, so to speak. He doesn't have the same level of authority that Morya does, for example. Even though he's on his way to Buddhahood, he still is relatively new. So he doesn't have the autonomy. He can't make the decisions that either Morya or the Mahachohan can make.
Well, I
so
wonder
that's
if-
what he's referring to, is that in 5 or 6 years, he's hoping that he will be at that point where he can authorize things that right now he's not allowed to.
So regarding the word guide that he uses,
My own guide, meaning that he doesn't have to report to someone else.
right? I think, but that could be a clue as to what he meant back here. Remember how we didn't know?
Maybe.
We didn't know who the new guide is, because he says it.
Okay, maybe that's what
The
it
new
is.
guide. Is there a new?
The only other new guide would be Subba Row. That's the only thing I can think of. So I'm not quite sure how those two references to guide connect.
Maybe it's Subba Row, yeah.
Maybe. All right. Well, that brings us up to the end of letter 60, which is more than enough for one day.
My goodness, that was awesome.
But exciting stuff. We tell you guys, this gets better and better.
I know.
Who could have ever guessed 7 months ago that we would be so deep into this? But we are, and we're learning a lot of interesting and extremely important information.
Why do you think this information, like there's a lot of very sexy things going on here? I'm using the term sexy because people in the exoteric world like this stuff. These manifestations and the drama of appearing on a ship and then proving something through phenomena. That's the stuff that people would in the outer world would love. Why do you think this never got very popular? Because there are so many stories and traditions in the yoga world that are popular, that people know about. Like yoga teachers teach different things from different masters. Why do you think this stuff is not more
I
known?
think it's because the source, being the Mahatma Letters to KH or to AP Sinnett, is so convoluted. It's not presented in a way like the stories that Eckhart Tolle uses. We need someone like you to synthesize that down into a very simple story. And so far, no one has done that.
We did some of it with our book.
Yes, and we're doing more of it now, but it's going to be in the form of video instead of a book. And who knows, maybe more people will watch something that's audio-visual as opposed to reading a book.
I hope so.
We hope so. We hope we're providing a resource that will be useful for people for many years to come. So we'll see you all hopefully next week in the next exciting episode of Secrets of the Mahatma Letters.